Item number 8 is our COVID-19 briefing and the Auckland Emergency Management Status update. But before inviting Ian Maxwell and Kate Crawford to speak to this item, I think I've got Raveen Judaram, Chief Executive of Watercare, on the line. Raveen, are you there?
I am, thank you, Mayor Goff.
And thank you for responding to our invitation to talk to us today. It's cloudy outside, but it doesn't rain as much as it needs to. We know that the situation has been pretty bad this year. I think with January and February, the driest ever months on record in Auckland. So I'd appreciate an update from you, please, on the water shortage situation and the planned move, if required, over the next few weeks to maybe stage 1 of a mandatory restriction situation. Raveen, so could I invite you to address the emergency meeting, please?
Sure, thank you. Good morning, councillors. As you're all aware, we are actually in a drought, quite a severe drought. The challenge with droughts is we don't know how severe it is until it's finished. But the advice I'm getting from Met Services and my staff is that we are probably looking at something that is beyond 1 in 100-year drought, if not close to a 1 in 1,000-year drought. So it would be interesting. We are taking this seriously as we need to. So far this calendar year, we've received less than half the rainfall that we would have expected. In the first 2 months, we only received 35% of the rain. We started the year with a lower than normal storage level because 2019 was a dry year as well. We had some rain after August, but the first 6 months of 2019 were the driest on record for Auckland. So the situation as of today is our lake levels are just over 48% full. It's 48.3%. Demand has fallen close to about 420 million litres a day, which is good. But yesterday it shot up to 450 million litres again. We suspect it was slightly dry and sunny yesterday, but also some businesses must be getting ready to open, so they must have been cleaning, etc. In terms of the storage level, we are in what we would call level 1 restriction zone. This is where in the Auckland Council bylaw, we would have gone out and said we are formally in a restriction. But because we've got COVID-19 and restrictions require staff to go and talk to customers who are not abiding by the bylaw, and we're trying to keep the physical distance, we have over the past maybe 8 weeks been focusing on voluntary messaging. And we've just done a survey in the last few days, and the survey of about 500 Aucklanders shows there is high recognition that we are in a drought, and a lot of the Aucklanders are reducing their water demand. The challenge we've got a supply and demand challenge. We don't have the rain. That's the supply side. And the analogy I use is like income and money in the bank. So when it rains, that's our income. And the storage is the money in the bank. So because our income has significantly been reduced, we are drawing down on our bank, the storage. And it's not very sustainable, as you can imagine. So the challenge we've got right now is Aucklanders have already reduced their demand. We are not in a restriction, but they've heeded to our calls. The lake levels are still falling. If we fall below 40% and we don't get the rain in May or June, we'll be staring down at restriction level 2. And level 2 is where we start telling industries that we want them to cut back on production, that we don't have water, because we are now preserving water for drinking, for the bare essentials. And that's the challenge. So we are very much at the mercy of the weather. In the meantime, so we've asked for demand to be reduced. Aucklanders have heeded that. We haven't formally put restrictions, and restrictions can only be put in after the council decides, because it's a council bylaw. So Watercare cannot put restrictions. It's something that we would be coming to you to say, we would like you to declare that we have level 1 restrictions or level 2 restrictions. In the meantime, what we are doing is we are drawing down heavily from the Waikato River. So we've got a capacity of 150 million litres a day, and we're drawing that at capacity. We're drawing down our Onehunga groundwater source. So we are optimizing all our existing sources so that we can have the supply side addressed while we don't have as much rain. So that's where we are, Mayor Goff. We are in a serious situation because we are very much at the mercy of the weather, and we just haven't had the rain. And Met Services have said that the rest of April isn't going to be very wet. They have said we might get rain in May, and I hope we do.
Thank you very much, Raveen. I know you have to get away in about 10 to 15 minutes. I suspect there'll be some interest from members of the Emergency Committee in asking questions. So can I suggest to members that one quick question and a brief comment. We'll do it in one, and we've only really got about 10 minutes with Raveen. So I'll run through the list as I normally do. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thanks, Raveen. Our Waikato resource consent to increase our take. Are we talking? Was Watercare talking to them, and do you need some assistance to try and advance our application up the list?
So Waikato Regional Council, we are in discussions. They have said that if the river is flowing at high levels, at the moment it's not, but after May it may, they are happy for us to increase our take from 150 to 175. And what we are doing right now is we are upgrading our Waikato water treatment plant so that we can treat another 25 million litres a day. Because taking the water is one thing, we need to be able to treat it, and our treatment capacity is 150. So we've got works underway already at Waikato to increase the capacity to 175, and we believe that we can push 175 through the existing pipeline. So Waikato Regional Council has come to the party and said we can take 25 million litres more once the river is flowing at a higher level, which they expect as soon as we get into May.
Hey, thanks, Raveen. That's at least a start. Cheers.
Thank you. In relation to that, there is a further application for resource consent that's been sitting there for several years now, and that I think we're now 99th in line, Raveen. We might have gone up even one or two.
Yes, you're right, Mayor Goff. So that is for the next stage, and we would need to build the treatment plant, and that's something that the board is seriously looking at, the timing of that, because it originally wasn't until 2025.
Yeah, as you're aware, I've drawn that problem to the attention of the Minister for the Environment, because of climate change means that we are going to, as we did last year, now this year, and maybe in years to come, just find drought after drought after drought. We are going to need that extra capacity, and that's one reasonably quick mechanism for increasing the capacity. I know the Waikato Regional Council is sympathetic, but they do have a backlog of resource consents, and we need to deal with that problem. Josephine Bartley.
I don't have any questions. Oh, actually, no, I don't.
Don't feel obliged, please. If you don't have a question, that helps us get through in 10 minutes. Kathy Casey.
Raveen, how if we are you expecting us today to rationalise the state of restrictions? And two, once restrictions become mandatory, how do you police it if we're still under lockdown?
Yes, very good question. So we've taken the view that we wouldn't want to be doing that during the lockdown, even under level 3. So we are very reliant on Auckland is responding to the message. Auckland is being aware of the situation, and that's why we've got a very strong social media and media presence around the issue, and I've just done an interview with Catherine Ryan. So we're getting the message out, and we are hoping that we don't need to police it. If we get into stage 2, then we will have to have the policing in place. So our position at the moment, unless the councillors feel otherwise, is that we shouldn't be doing a formal restriction, a level 1 restriction. We should continue our voluntary messaging.
I think as soon as you believe that it's necessary, Ravine, for us to adopt that bylaw for level 1, you'd find that we will willingly do so, but at this stage we're working on your advice that it's not required yet to formally adopt that bylaw. Councillor Collins.
Thanks, Mayor. Just wanted to say thanks, Ravine. I like the analogy around savings, rain and income. Thank you.
Councillor Pipacoom.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Ravine, for the update. No questions from me.
Thank you. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Thank you, Ravine. And I have been getting updates from, as the council liaison, from the chair, Margaret Devlin. But there's 2 questions. One is, have you the ability through, monitoring remotely when, as you're always measuring people's use because it comes out on our bill. Is there an ability to target people if you had to be able to give them sort of gentle reminders? That's one question.
Not home. The only area where we have smart water meters is in Waiuku. So we have 3,000 smart meters in Waiuku where we know what they use every day. For the rest of the domestic customers in Auckland, we only do a reading every 2 months. So we don't know. We do have lots of district meters around the city, so we know what areas use a lot of water. So we know, for example, that during the dry months of January, February, the Hobson area, what is Hobson for us, which is Remuera, was using a lot of water, and it's the gardens, and so we target the messaging there. With large industrial customers, yes, we do, and we are in discussions with them right now. And as you would realize, Cotton Soft, who make toilet paper, they're using 4 times more water than they ever did because they're making so much toilet paper.
It's interesting, given we're probably not using more, so we're just buying more. The other question, Ravine, if you'll indulge me, Mr. Chair, is around the fact that normally, under normal circumstances, what I heard was you would put restrictions on, but you've held back because there's no ability to enforce at the moment. So it's not as if we don't need restrictions, it's just that you haven't put them because of the COVID-19. Is that, I just wanted to get that clear.
Absolutely, but our messaging is as if we were in level 1. So level 1 restrictions are you can't use the water outside your homes to wash cars, houses, water blasting. We would stop the use of hydrant standpipes for purposes that trucks are using for keeping dust down and construction. And so all that is not happening. So the target audience has been mum and dads at home who were otherwise trying to wash their homes and do water blasting and all that. So the difference would be that we would send people who to homes where people are not obliging. And that's not what we're doing. But otherwise, the messaging is exactly the same. In fact, some people think we are already in level 1 restriction, and that's good. We would like them to think that.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now, indulge Councillor Cooper because she is our liaison councillor, and thank you for the work that you're doing there, Linda. But if we can restrict our questions to 1 from now on. Councillor Angela Dalton.
No questions, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Darby.
Well, thank you, Ravine. Just at, probably in, what was it, May, June last year, we had this challenge as well, not to this extent. So 2 years in a row, we got out of jail with some extreme rain that fell in the late winter. But here we face it again. So I'm looking at your climate strategy, and it forecasts, it discusses droughts in the spring and greater rainfall events in the autumn. But we haven't got what that strategy highlights. We just, in this instance. So I guess going forward, Raveen, and I know you can rely on your demand management planning there, but going forward, what call are you going to make to the planning teams at council to possibly request changes whereby people are required to retain water wherever they can in developments? And what call would you have on the planning team to start looking at microgrid systems and that sort of thing? Because it just seems like, even when I look at your strategy, it's not going to provide us with the tools from a planning perspective anyway to ensure that we do have a sustainable and reliable water supply.
Yeah, it's a very good question, and we will have conversations with council planners and our own. The challenge we've got is where we have assumed that storage in homes is going to reduce the demand on the water care system. That has failed. That assumption failed. So early this year, because there was no rain, all the homes that are otherwise reliant on rain, their demand was met by the water care system. So the demand on the water care system increased more than what we planned for. So what we now have to do is assume that all those storages are not working, which is counterintuitive. So I agree with you. Those storage tanks in people's homes will work as long as it's got rain, as long as there's income. But if there's no income, the bank will be empty. But the point you're making is that we need to look at what are the strategies. And currently, the Auckland water supply strategy has always been around, we will have a one-year drought. Well, we've got a drought that has continued over 2 years. So the storage we have in our lakes is equivalent to 8 months demand. That's all. So if it doesn't rain at all, the amount of water we've got in storage is equivalent to 8 months of demand in Auckland. So we have to seriously look at our strategy around supply and demand, both.
Thank you. Councillor Al Filipaina.
All good.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
I have no questions, but I just want to say I can think of no better hands on the tiller in these uncertain times than yourself, Raveen, so good luck.
Thank you. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Thanks for the update. No questions from me.
Councillor Richard Hills.
Thank you. It's probably a comment question, but just I guess the two things that I'm getting when I put these messages out there is A, people want a bit more clear instruction, at the moment where it's just guidelines, don't wash your car, don't wash your house, but I feel like they need a bit more request, and I don't, even when it's not legal, say smoking in parks, the knowledge that you definitely can't do something means your neighbours and whoever else kind of, that social pressure. The second thing is, what is the, and I guess maybe an email could come in the next few days, is what is the long-term plan? Because this has sort of been 2 years, really dry winters, then extremely dry summers, and we know with climate change it's going to continue, and I just worry, and everyone asks, if the Waikato is only 25 million litres a day, that's not going to cut it. I don't know where we go from here. So I guess if we could have an update in the next couple of weeks, because that's always the next question people ask is, well, what are you doing to make sure this doesn't keep happening? But thank you so much for all the work. It's massive.
Thank you. We'll do that. Thanks.
Thank you. Member Tony Kake.
Raveen, I've always referred to you as a man of integrity, mate, so keep up the good work. I think all my questions have been answered.
Thank you. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
No questions.
Thank you. Councillor Daniel Newman.
Look, Raveen, just a brief remark from me to thank you for the work that Watercare is doing at the moment to get all the water sources on stream as quickly as possible and keep up the great work.
Thanks. Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you. Councillor Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just perhaps a quick comment, Raveen. thank you for the messaging that you're getting out there. My comment would just be probably signalling. I appreciate that you can't really do different messaging across the region about where water sits, and but just for you to be aware, and perhaps your communications people, that in areas like Rodney, they have the aquifers, they have the new water treatment plant up there that's future-proof, got a very deep bore, and a lot of people are on bores themselves up there. So just so you know, when a message goes out like that from Watercare, it does create a lot of messaging back to the local boards and myself about, why isn't Rodney resilient? This doesn't seem right when we've got the new plant and a lot of people on boards as well. So I appreciate it would be confusing to send out different messaging, but I just want to make you aware of that if you weren't aware, Raveen. That was all, and your respective liaison teams.
No, thank you. No, you're right. The new water treatment we put in there has put that part of Auckland in a better state, but our message has to be for everyone. So unfortunately, you're right, but we'll take on board your messaging requirements. Thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Desley Simpson.
Thank you, Your Worship. Raveen, if we've got problems in my ward, i.e. Auckland, Remuera being one of the highest users, I'd appreciate some extra messaging I can help disseminate to that community that might help with the problem. And look, thank you very much for what you're doing. You're doing a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Will do.
Thank you. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
Oh, thank you, Raveen. Keep up the good work. I'd like to also thank David Hawkins for all the good work. But one of the things that I've noticed this year is because of the dry weather, a lot of the pipes are moving, having a lot of leakage. There's one that I've just reported, which it was reported on the 28th of March, a water leak, and then again reported on the 1st of April, water leak from a private. Apparently it's on the private property, but it looks like it could be on the council berm, and people are quite concerned because there's been a lot of water that's been leaking for since the 28th of March when it was first reported, and apparently been leaking for about a month or so before that. Can we do something? Is there something that we can help you with, or you can do, like they do in Australia, if there's leakage on a private property, that we can actually go in or you can go in and fix it, and then it's the owner of the property would have to sort it out a little bit later on if we have a problem finding and trying to locate the owner of the property, because if we had many months of enough water that could fill a swimming pool leaking, and because it's on private property, it's not a very good look. So is there anything we can do there, Raveen?
Yeah, no, thank you. The council can, under its numerous local government powers, Watercare can't. It's something that we are looking at. In Singapore and many other places, the water authority is able to go in and fix it and then put the charge back on the owner. In Auckland, in New Zealand, the council, because water supply is a council business and we are part of council does have the powers to do that.
Thank you. Chair, David Typery.
Morena, Raveen, no questions, Your Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Two quick questions, Raveen. First off, just referring to Australian cities, why can't Auckland do what Australian cities have done for some years? That's around offering rebates for water tanks, enhancing grey water recycling. And the other question goes to your comparison with the dams being a bank. Is not a distributed reserve, that is a multiplicity of water tanks across all of Auckland, identical in concept to the dams as far as a bank, and does not that make a substantial contribution to enhancing supply, because you're capturing all of that water across the catchment?
Thank you. Raveen?
Yeah, I think the study was done by Beckers for us and council a few years ago. If you're referring to storage in homes, storage in homes will work if you have the larger volumes of storage. And I think Mayor Goff has got larger volumes of storage at his place at Ardmore, and so he was in a better space than most others. So I think the answer to your question is yes, you can, but you need far more storage than a piddly little tank on the side of the house, because that just gets eaten up very quickly.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raveen. I won't mention the fact that I'm right next to your water filter station and I can't get water from you, but I have got 80,000 litres of storage, so that's good. Councillor John Watson.
Quick question, Raveen. In terms of the contribution of Aucklanders to voluntary saving, am I right in assuming that at a time when people are staying at home, that usually one would expect their water usage to go up, i.e. they're in the house all day, they may be out exercising more or whatever. So A, is that a right assumption? And B, if it is, then that would seem to be indicative that Auckland is even responding more than we would expect.
Yeah, you're right. Our high-level analysis suggests that the first week was baking week in most homes, and I had 3 daughters, and when they were young, if they did the baking, the kitchen was a mess, and it took more to clean up. So I think a lot more water was used because people are in the house. Our understanding from the supermarkets is last week was grooming week. So they sold a lot of hair dyes and things. So last week would have been a lot of long time in the shower and washing of hair. Now, you're right. People staying home are using more water, but then there was a corresponding decrease in water use because most of the businesses were closed.
Thank you. John, you asked last week about the supply to rural through rural tankers. Raveen, I think we've been supplying about up to a million litres a day through our use of Fonterra tankers, but the demand for that is the water tank. We've had enough rain to fill many of the water tanks. The demand for that has fallen back, and I think that ceases this coming Tuesday, doesn't it?
Yes, that's right. Yeah.
Okay, that's good. That just answers your question from last week, John. Councillor Paul Young.
Thank you, Raveen. No question, Mr. Mayor.
Well, thank you very much, Raveen, and I just want to make the comment, I think, on behalf of everybody. We are ready to go to bring in level 1 mandatory restrictions as soon as that is requested. I have been notified by the chair of your board that that you may want to do that in the next couple of weeks, and we will respond immediately to that. We recognise the severity of this drought and the need to act, and as one of the councillors, I think, just commented, if we have that mandatory restriction there, then the social pressure of somebody standing in the front of their garden, watering the garden or washing their car, just is that much stronger. So that's our invitation to you. As soon as you believe that is required, we will act upon it. So thank you very much, and I hope we haven't held you up too late for your next appointment.
No, I'm fine. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mayor Goff and councillors. Thank you.
Thanks, Raveen.
Right, we now come to the substantive COVID-19 briefing, and we have Ian Maxwell and Kate Crawford on the line. I don't know which of you would like to lead off on that, but if you can do a quick presentation, and we'll respond hopefully succinctly and quickly to that.
So look, I'll start, Your Worship. So just what Kate will do is she will outline where we are with respects to the Auckland Emergency Coordination Centre, and then I'll come in after that and talk about, in particular, about how Council is gearing up to provide services under Alert Level 3. So Kate, are you there?
Yes, good morning.
Sorry, so if you could just talk through the where you're at with the Emergency Coordination Centre and the Auckland Emergency Management Office.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ian. Good morning, Mayor Phil and councillors, and thank you very much for having us here again with you to provide an update for Auckland Emergency Management's response to the current state of national emergency due to COVID-19. The nationwide state of national emergency has been extended by a further 7 days to next Wednesday, the 29th of April. And as you will be well aware, we remain at Alert Level 4 with a planned shift to Alert Level 3 after 11:59 p.m. on Monday, the 27th of April. I am joined this morning by Mace Ward and Tanya Winslade, and we have made a slight change to the way we are managing the duties of the Group Controller. And rather than taking a week on and off, Mace and I are now working alongside each other to ensure continuity of leadership. So Mace is kindly supporting me as a Deputy Controller in the Deputy Controller role. This is a structural decision that allows us to spread some of the leadership responsibilities, which are heightened right now as we focus on both response and recovery. And Rachel will continue to be the Duty Controller on the weekends. Tanya joins me to support any questions that you may have with the Whakarai Māori liaison work stream, and when it comes to your questions, I may defer to Mace and Tanya to help me with those responses. So our update will cover 5 core areas of activity, and I will commence with the Emergency Coordination Centre status. So our Emergency Coordination Centre at Bledisloe House remains active with a team of people from across Auckland Emergency Management and the Council, working together with representatives from other response agencies. Sorry, I'll move closer. With other representation from across other response agencies in the region. Those that do not need to work in the office join us remotely from home. We're operating in tandem, but are located separately across the ECC with our Repatriation, Isolation and Quarantine Coordination Cell, which is a multi-agency response to managing the needs of returning travellers or New Zealand travellers. Caring for communities. Our response continues to be predominantly focused on the non-health related welfare needs of Aucklanders and people isolating in our region. Our welfare food parcel initiative, which has now been running for 3 weeks, it does seem a little longer than that, but it has been for 3 weeks, has taken over 25,000 phone calls via the Auckland Council Contact Centre, which has resulted in more than 13,500 requests for assistance. As of Tuesday, we have dispatched 7,867 parcels, and a further 5,000 are expected to go out in the next week or so. A few general observations around this piece are many Aucklanders are facing sudden change in their circumstances and struggling to meet ends meet. Our teams are connecting callers to other services where possible, including other agencies for ongoing food assistance and providing guidance on how they might seek financial support through MSD. Many callers are reaching out for welfare assistance for the first time, and we do not underestimate just how hard it is for them when they ask for help. With regard to the basic food parcels that are being put together, the national supply chain is under considerable pressure. Other agencies like ourselves, food banks and charitable organisations are trying to source bulk supplies from the same supply chain, which also supermarkets are attempting to.
Sorry, Kate, we're having a problem with your sound. Maybe if you take the video off, and that might help, but you're breaking up a bit there. If you could just start your last sentence again, please.
Apologies. Sorry. So from time to time, availability supplies will slow down, and our distribution of food parcels and we will continue to do our best to manage both expectations. I will advise at this point that the group controllers across New Zealand and the National Lifelines Coordinator are working with the National Crisis Management Centre on this issue. We have had grateful and positive feedback from many Aucklanders already and have dealt with a small number of issues and complaints. The latter might be anything from an issue with delivery to a delay or error in dispatching a parcel. Again, our teams continue to do their best to manage these and acknowledge the fact that people are under tremendous pressure right now, creating stressful situations at home. So the repatriation, isolation and quarantine coordination. As I mentioned earlier, this work stream is operating in a complementary way to the ECC, Emergency Coordination Centre. It includes representatives from a number of partner agencies, including the Ministry of Health, New Zealand Defence Force and Police, airport agencies and government departments, and is focused on implementing the government's mandatory 14-day isolation conditions. Funded nationally, this program is delivered on a day-to-day basis by the multi-agency group based with us here. There are currently 2,300 people in managed isolation and 100 in quarantine in hotels in our region. This number changes daily as people reach their 14-day anniversaries, as they are known, and can return home, and as new flights arrive home. Recent developments include the standing up of a further welfare service to help the welfare and psychological support and psychosocial support for returnees in managed isolation and quarantine, including on-site social work support. We are also providing local assistance from the repatriation of foreign nationals. This is essentially coordinated by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade, foreign governments and airlines. We're simply making sure that people can transit easily through Auckland when it comes time to return home. Tipo whakarai. As you heard before, we have stood up our Māori-specific function under the ECC structure to work with Māori communities. Tipa Whakarai has supported the establishment of Te Parangi Information Portal and provides accessibility for whānau hoa, which is sight and hearing impaired. It continues with its outreach programs to marae, iwi and Matawaka organisations, including 13 staff from the Council's Maori Staff Network, making outreach calls to 700 vulnerable Maori on behalf of MSD. 66 isolated and vulnerable kaumātua who have been referred through the Maori Staff Network to Te Whakarai for support. Excuse me. Continuing to contact iwi and Matawaka and marae to check in and to identify welfare needs. Delivering cleaning packs and food parcels and food support to marae and whānau and urupa signage. General coordination and tasking. We continue to work with police and maritime services and response agencies to deter boaties from heading to Aotea Great Barrier Island during lockdown. As we are approaching alert level 3 and moving from alert level 4, this creates unnecessary pressure on the residents of Great Barrier Island and the island's resources. Our Lifelines coordination function continues to work on our response to Auckland's drought conditions, including the ongoing initiatives with the Council's Healthy Waters Department on rural water supplies and a watching brief on Watercare's water supply status. And as always, we maintain the ability to stand up a further emergency response if needed. I would like to end by acknowledging all of the Auckland Emergency Management and Council staff that have been working on this response. This is a 7-day operation and is a blend of tactical and problem solving alongside strategic planning. While guided by pandemic planning, our agency are also required to build processes and respond to new situations as we go. And the collaborative work we are doing with other government agencies, response organisations, partners and our community is key to making this work. And we are very grateful for the depth of the interagency support that is currently underway right now. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. If we come back to you, Ian, have you got some matters to add to that?
Yes, look, thank you, Your Worship. So I'm going to focus more on our organisation, our group, if you like, Auckland Council. So we've had no further cases of COVID across the council group. We've had 3 cases altogether, and all of those individuals are recovering well. But look, with the announcement by the Prime Minister earlier this week, I'm going to focus today very much on what services Council will run from next Tuesday when we move to Alert Level 3. And also I'll just run through briefly how our people will be working during that Alert Level 3. So under Level 3, our focus is very much upon safety. And in general, our people and our staff must work from home unless that is not possible. And their bubbles need to stay small and effectively they need to stay at home as much as possible. So our workplaces will remain closed to all but a few of our staff. And people who are vulnerable to the virus, those who are older, those who have existing medical conditions will certainly remain at home. And actually this will continue right through to the end of Alert Level 2. But look, under Level 3, we must limit the interaction of our staff with customers, and we must not encourage Aucklanders to gather together. And as a result of that, normal services such as our libraries, our pools, our gyms, our community and arts centres, our campgrounds, our holiday parks, community venues for hire, our animal shelters, our playgrounds, all remain closed under Alert Level 3. public toilets and toilets in parks, except for those required to support essential workers such as truck and bus drivers, will also remain closed. So all of that is very similar to Alert Level 4, but there are some differences as a result of Alert Level 3, and in summary I'll run through those briefly. So our inspection services, our staff such as noise control officers, environmental health officers, building inspectors will recommence their roles. Their roles will be managed in a way that they meet health requirements, and I'll talk a bit about that later, but essentially those services will commence. Our regional parks and gardens will open, although again vehicle access to those will be closed, but the actual parks themselves and the botanic gardens and so forth will be open. The park rangers will be working on site. We're working to open our waste transfer stations, but we're still putting a bit of effort into how we may do that. We want to avoid a situation where there are queues of cars or vehicles and who can work safely in our offices. The other change concerns asset maintenance and construction or capital projects. So our asset maintenance programs and our capital projects can recommence, but there's a couple of situations we need to be careful here. One is that every project and every program which does recommence must follow safety controls, and so many of the construction firms involved with our capital works projects are developing those as we speak. So there'll be some quite significant controls around accessing construction or getting near the movement of the workers within the sites. But the other issue, which I'm sure you are each aware of, is that council is not in the same financial position as we were prior to COVID-19, and our revenue is down some hundreds of millions of dollars. So given the need to manage prudently, we need to manage our financial commitments. And while clearly the construction projects that are underway, where there are workers that's under contract, they'll recommence, we need to look at the pipeline of projects coming through. And so that's a piece of work that's going on at the moment. We just simply can't turn the whole tap back on, given the sort of financial reality we find ourselves in. In summary then, Alert Level 3 is a change from Alert Level 4, but Alert Level 3 is still very restrictive for the nature of council services and practice. So it's not a significant change from what we've been having over the last month or so. An example of that is the approach to governance. This very committee, the Emergency Committee, is held digitally, it's held remotely, and that will continue under Alert Level 3. The essential services that have been operating will obviously continue to operate, but the new alert level does provide for some additional services as well as construction and maintenance to recommence. So we're likely to have a few additional staff working from their normal places of work. As part of Alert Level 3, the government requires all places of work to be safe, and clearly so do we. So we need to be able to ensure who is at work, the location of their work, and also who they're actually interacting with. So every person who comes to work will need to maintain a brief record or a diary of where they went and who they interacted with. And those records will aid the tracing of people should anyone become sick. We also need to ensure that at work our staff can maintain physical distancing. So this effectively means spreading out, taking up more floor space than usual. And for those people, particularly field staff, inspectors, environmental health officers, etc., who are interacting with Aucklanders, they may need appropriate training and personal protection equipment beyond that. As you'll be aware, the supply of personal protection equipment is an issue right across New Zealand, and our priority for the nation is being given to health professionals. So we are holding some personal protection equipment within council, and what we will be doing is we will be prioritising that which is available, and we'll be clearly targeting people who are interacting with Aucklanders. We're also looking forward to what Alert Level 2 will look like for Council. We don't know when Alert Level 2 will commence, but it will commence following Alert Level 3, and we're putting quite a bit of effort into what that looks like. Many of our services will reopen, although again, there might be a staged approach to reopening services given the health requirements and indeed the sort of emergency budget situation that we find ourselves in. So our staff are putting work into what Alert Level 2 looks like, and more information around that will become available over the next sort of 10 days or so. So look, I'll stop there, and I'm sure between Kate and myself we can respond to any questions, and if there's anything in particular you want us to chase up, if you write it down, we'll do that outside of the particular meeting.
Thank you very much, Ian and Kate. And can I just acknowledge that we also have online, I think, Tanya Winslade and Mace Ward. So I'll work backwards on questions, integrate questions and comments. If they're necessary, please don't feel obliged to make a comment, because we are trying to get through a pretty long agenda today without the extraordinary hours of last week. Can I just, on the matter of agenda, indicate to members and councillors that we will move at the end of our, I think, item 12 into confidential to discuss the Audit and Risk Committee Risk and Assurance update. And following that, we'll also have a financial update from Kevin Ramsey. So I'm not sure whether that's in members' diaries, but if you can make sure that you can hang on for that, if we can get to that quite quickly without an extension of the day, that would be good. It just gives us an update on where we're at along the process of going back to consultation and having a budget, we hope, finalised by mid to late July. Okay, I'll start at the bottom. So questions and comments, just one each, please. And we'll start with Councillor Paul Young. Paul?
Thank you, Ian and Kate. No question, no comment from me.
Thank you. Councillor John Watson.
Thanks. Ian, just in respect of your comment about the projects starting up again, I'm assuming that projects that are half finished or underway, they will automatically be resuming. There will be no question of them being affected by the shortage of council income. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. They're under contract, and obviously, you'd be spending money and not getting any outcome if you pulled away from those. It's more the projects that haven't reached that stage, so in the pipeline coming down through the system. Okay. Secondly, in terms of the need and our support, food packages and stuff. At our last meeting, we were told there might be some possibility of getting a heat map to show where the demand is coming from. So, for instance, Councillor Walker and I are hearing that there's greater demand in parts of our community than was the case even just a week ago. So, is that coming through, or are there problems with that?
Yes, good morning, and thank you for this question. We're actually just finalising the heat map in the next 24 hours, and it'll be released very soon.
Great, thank you.
Thanks, John. And I think Auckland Transport has advised me that they will be reopening most of their projects as of Tuesday morning, which means 2,500 construction workers just for Auckland Transport alone will be back at work. But following the guidelines, the health and safety guidelines that Ian outlined. Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. Two comments. First off, is it possible to have some written notes around these updates on each occasion, because there's a lot of information there?
Yes, it is. I'll get that done to you. I must admit, I write them out for myself, so it won't be too difficult to get them out.
Yeah,
and that also goes to some of the previous updates, because this is a really important time for us to capture in terms of ongoing resilience. The other question I've got just goes to prioritisation. And people in the community have certainly brought to my attention the poor state of footpaths. There have been injuries brought to my attention, so I just emphasise that those things are important in terms of work that we do.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, look, if councillors would prefer to have something in writing, there are updates done regularly, so we can make those available to councillors. In terms of inquiries, I did ask about because some of the MP I talking this week both to the National and Labor Party caucuses in Auckland. There was a huge demand going from councillors to AEM. I forget how many queries a day. It was 50 a day, and that was slowing down their work. So we're if you've got queries that are really important, feed them through as you have been through your EAs, but we're trying to keep a bit of pressure off the Auckland Emergency Management. Thank you, Councillor, and Chair David Taiperi.
Kia ora, Your Worship. This is probably more of a question to you. When is it likely that the emergency committee format will cease to operate, and when can the Independent Māori Statutory Board meet with the council under its obligations under legislation?
Yeah, I've got Phil Wilson in the room with me, so I'll get him to comment on that. What endeavouring to do, obviously, under level 3, as with level 4, there will still be some restrictions, but hopefully as we get into level 2, we can start to resume something closer to normality. But Phil, you might like to comment on that.
Chair David and councillors, we're working on that scenario right now. It's likely, I have to say, that we will recommend status quo with the emergency committee, rationalised decision making and so forth, right through level 3. But beyond that, we're doing the planning now, and I should be in a position to report that very shortly. And that would apply by extension to meetings of the governing body with the IMSB board.
Thank you. I raise that, Your Worship, because I want to address a number of the matters that continually be reported to us, and I've had some written responses that are too general in my mind, and I think it's important that as soon as possible, excuse me, the board can meet with the governing body to address a number of issues. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'll take one on board, and I think both Phil and I indicated that we're still going to have to do this stuff remotely, certainly through level 3, but getting into level 2, I think we can start to re-examine and hopefully get some of the other committees up and functioning normally, because while we're doing the urgent stuff now, there will be a backlog, so we'll have quite long agendas, I think, into the future. Councillor Sharon Stewart.
No comment.
Thanks, Sharon. Councillor Desley Simpson.
No, thank you very much for the update. No comment or question.
Councillor Greg Sayers.
Thank you, Your Worship. Can you hear me all right?
I can hear you good.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Well, I could hear you good. As soon as I said that, you faded out. So can you have a try again? I think we've lost you for the moment, Greg. I may come back and see if we've got some improvement in your line there. So I'll just hold you over for a moment. Councillor Daniel Newman.
No questions. Thank you very much for the
Thank you. Councillor Tracy Mulholland.
Thanks, Your Worship. No questions or comments, or just a little thank you to Parul and the team at Waste who fixed a major Salvation Army problem. So thank you.
Oh, I'm glad to hear that's fixed. Councillor Richard Hills.
No questions, just congratulations, Deborah, and thank you.
Thank you. Member Tony Kake.
Kia ora, and just a quick thank you to the emergency team in working in partnership with a lot of other essential services, particularly I want to acknowledge, I see them as part of the whole council family, the Auckland transport staff that helped us deliver over 4,000 hygiene packs to 98 streets in Papakura over the last 2 weeks. So, Mayor Phil, if you could pass on my support to the leadership team within Auckland Transport for making their staff available to do that. Also, I'm a little bit like David. I'd like to see a Māori specific plan as it relates to the impact of going back to level 3, level 2, as it relates to Māori contractors, Māori staff, and vulnerable Māori communities. And I think we have to be quite specific because the generalist approach has never really worked for Māori. So, but I think it just confirms, I guess, what in more detail what David Kaipari wants to take on with you guys, and how we might engage the Independent Māori Statutory Board staff in developing that response. Kia ora.
Thank you, Tony, and thank you for the work at the Papakura Marae. I've been down there on a number of occasions, and including, over the Christmas period when you do your food packages, and you make a huge contribution to the community there. So thank you to you and your team for the work there. Can I come back to Greg Sayers? Greg, can we have another go at your question?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Sorry I dropped out there. Ian, I just had a question around, you mentioned about the transfer stations, and you're doing some work around how they might be opened in a way that didn't create, queues of people, because I'm sure there's plenty of people that have trailer loads of goodies they want to get rid of after doing so much work around their properties, probably myself included. So are you looking at something like a booking system like we have for the inorganic collections where people could, book to visit these transfer stations, or are you able to enlighten a little bit about how that might be managed with ideas that you have going forward?
Look, I'm afraid I can't. What I can do, though, is I can catch up after this meeting with Parul from Waste Solutions, and we can get, because I know she's certainly putting some thought into how to manage this issue, and I can get that information out to you.
Yeah, okay, thank you, Ian. Much appreciated. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor. That's a really good question. So maybe, Ian, if you can get back to all of us on that, and also when we might expect the inorganic collections to resume, which I presume will be again not until level 2 or maybe even level 1. But that would be useful, I think, to all of us. Councillor Shane Henderson.
Nothing, thanks. Well done. Great work.
Thank you. Councillor Chris Fletcher.
Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Al Filipaina.
Thank you, Your Worship, and again to everybody, well done on the work that's happened to date. Ian, at what stage will information go out to our community around what happens during level 3? For example, at our cemeteries, I know that Nikki is waiting for MOH to send some guidelines, and then that can be shared to the community. What you said earlier, Ian, around our parks, libraries, and not being open, to save all that confusion, when is something going to be released, whether it be through Auckland or through yourself, Your Worship, that goes out to our community so they know and they're not guessing?
Look, thank you. We expect that to go out tomorrow. There will still be some uncertainty. So, for example, you highlighted the issue with the cemetery. So there's information not just from, if you like, council, but also from, in that case, Ministry for Health. But look, in general, information about our services will go out tomorrow.
Thank you, Councillor.
Thank you.
That's a good question. Councillor Chris Darby.
Nothing from me, Mayor.
Thank you. Councillor Angela Dalton.
Thank you. A quick question. Do you have an idea of when the food parcels will stop? Because I understand exactly what you're saying about they're under pressure and the supply chain's under pressure, but we're going to have quite a gap to fill once it stops from a community level. So are we looking at continuing through level 3 and then ceasing?
I'll get Kate to answer that because I had the same conversation with her yesterday, Angela. Kate.
Yes, and thank you very much for this question. So this is a government-directed initiative. So at this stage, we don't have an end date as such, but we are working with the National Crisis Management Centre to ensure that when we do have an identified transition date or period, that we are communicating that appropriately, and that we, as we transition, we work very closely with the other food bank providers and social services that are delivering other services to the communities as well.
Great, thank you very much.
Thank you. I think it's an important question, and I'm imagining that the government funding will continue through level 3. and then rather than a sudden and abrupt halt, because we're delivering over 800 packages a day some days, we'll need to transition out back to the normal food banks who would generally do this. It was always seen as a bridge, particularly with the large number of people that were suddenly finding themselves without a job. But you know, my stress to Minister Sepuloni will be to keep it going for as long as that real level of pressure exists, and not to transition until the food banks are able to cope in a more normal situation. Councillor Linda Cooper.
Kia ora, Mr Mayor, and thanks to the Civil Defence team. My question, and you mentioned around revenues, etc., and you talked about some sorts of enforcement. Is this going to actually help with our revenue again, given that we rely more heavily on outside revenue than we do on rates? You think, is there a time frame where, I mean, not so much building consents, but that other regulatory kind of income we get?
I think, thank you, Councillor. I think this is going to sound terrible, but I think the level of revenue associated with those activities is comparatively marginal to the overall revenue loss that the council and the council group has suffered as a result of the COVID crisis. So yes, I'm sure there will be some marginal increase, but it's primarily aimed at supporting the construction activity, the reopening of takeaways, those sorts of things. So I don't think it's a significant revenue source in the sense of the wider council situation.
So we're going to be doing it tough for a lot longer. Thank you.
Now, Councillor Al Filipaina had a supplementary on food parcels. Councillor Filipaina?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. And question to Kate. Kate, as a result of some of the food banks that we have in Tamaki, is there an option for those people who have the ability to deliver, accessing the parcels that are being put together at Spark and Vector through obviously level 3?
Thank you very much. That's a really great question, but I might actually pass this to Mace to answer, as he's been doing some operational work in this area.
Well, those sound effects were something.
Good morning, councillors. Thanks, Councillor Filipaina.
Mate, I don't know if you're in the same room as Kate, but there's another. You're getting a lot of feedback. So if you can close down any other microphone near you, thank you. Yep, go ahead, Mace.
Sorry about that, councillors. We have changed rooms now. So. Yes, Councillor Filipaina, we are. I've lost my train of thought actually about that, but largely we are transitioning to back to food banks over the next 2 weeks, as Kate mentioned, and we are providing support into food banks additionally as well. So from time to time, as food banks find the same problems as we're finding with supply chain for food, we are providing top-ups for food banks, as Anne Marai, in fact, as well. I'm happy to talk separately with you if you want to talk offline.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Pipacoon.
Thank you for the update. I would like to know if there's going to be any further communication about how level 3 is applied differently to our remote communities. So I guess the question is there going to be any different application of level 3 to our remote communities? And I'm thinking particularly on the islands and the travel, where Auckland Transport's put out information to say that travel's okay within your region or extending your bubble, but that actually probably isn't correct when it comes to Aotea and Waiheke. So we'd just like to know if there is any further work being done about level 3 for our remote communities, and if there is going to be comms that really addresses how alert level 3 is going to be applied generally and specifically.
Look, thank you. So at the moment, what we know is that the short answer to the question is no. It's being applied generally across the country and regions. However, that said, we also are aware that the chair of the Waiheke Local Board has contacted various ministries in Wellington around this very issue. So it is a live issue at the moment. I think for Great Barrier Island, apart from boaties going out there, and the view from the New Zealand Police is that there's actually far fewer boaties out there now. They've been coming home and they feel there's not an issue. But for Waiheke, the ferries continue to operate, and there's a bit of concern, particularly from the island community. But I think as we speak right now, there's no specific rules additional for remote communities.
Thank you.
Thank you. So will there be, like Auckland Transport's done what it means under Alert Level 3, can we expect an update generally in terms of what it means wider with our facilities and services?
Yes, I can do that. So I'll put something together and I'll get that material out to you in the next sort of probably early tomorrow morning.
I wasn't thinking you, Ian, I was thinking more from the comms perspective. Is that going to be
well, when I say me, it'll probably be some poor comms person that'll be doing it.
Great.
That sounds terrible. But no, I'll make the promise and we'll get it delivered. So look, and I'm also aware that there is this discussion going on in Wellington around the sort of issue raised by the chair of the Waiheke Local Board, and I know it's been raised by Stewart Island and a couple of others as well.
Thank you. Councillor Fesso-Collins.
Thanks, Mayor. I just wanted to firstly say thanks to Mace for getting back to me in relation to media queries that I received about the delay in food parcels. I just wanted to see Mace or Kate if you could maybe elaborate on some key to give confidence, some key things that are happening so that there isn't the delay that people are experiencing. I welcome the news that you've been doing quite a bit of work, and I understand that you've been inundated. But I just think to give, before I make any comment to media, just to give some clarity on the steps that are being taken to ensure that people aren't having to wait the kind of days that they're experiencing.
Kate, you might be best placed to answer that.
Yes, and thank you very much for the opportunity to answer this question. So we have been working over the past week to look at our data, our information that we hold on those that have called us to date, and we have done extensive work to ensure that we have confirmed those who have received their parcels and those who have not received their parcels to date. If there has been a period of a wait longer than 3 days, we're doing our best to ensure that we're communicating with those people and keeping them informed on when the next deliveries will be taking place and when they should expect their package. If they call into our call centre for a second time, we're ensuring that we do call them back and have the conversation with them about the expectations about delay. From a national perspective, I'm working very closely with the National Crisis Management Centre and the National Lifelines Coordinator to ensure that the national considerations are in alignment with our needs here in Auckland, and to ensure that the issues that we are facing have a voice back down in the national setting.
Thank you very much, Kate. I know talking, Councillor, to Chris Farrelly at Auckland City Mission, their delays are currently, I think, about 48 hours. Day before yesterday, we received over 1,000 calls for the packages, so there is a bit of a delay. Occasionally there is a glitch where a name drops out of the system, and if we get that, then we can deliver a package urgently. But I think people will probably have to show just a wee bit of patience, with that 2 to 3 days wait while we have this pressure on our staff, and they have to obviously operate at a slightly lower level of productivity to maintain the 2 metres distancing, etc. But I have talked to Kate about this, and we are trying to get them delivered as quickly as possible. Right. Thank you very much for that. Councillor Kathy Casey.
Oh, hi, Mace. Can you just clarify something for me? Under level 3, you're still obliged to take your exercise locally. Is that right? Mace?
Perhaps I can perhaps answer that. It's Ian Maxwell here.
Oh, hi, yeah.
So the under level 3, the story essentially is we very much as a nation want you to take your exercise locally, but you do have the capability of moving in the region. But in general, we're encouraging people to take exercise locally. That's one of the reasons why even in our regional parks we're going to not permit vehicles to get into the regional park, because we simply don't want people to be travelling right across the city. So the message still essentially under level 3 is stay local, although it's lifted a small amount from what it was under level 4.
Great, thank you. That clarifies that. Will you be making any changes at all to the current dog recommendations?
I'm not sure if Claudia's on the line. She may be able to respond to that.
Kia ora koutou, this is Claudia. I actually don't know if there's going to be any changes from what we've done in level 4, but I will also follow up with Craig. I believe there is going to be some additional services that Craig's regulatory team will be providing around potential dog management or particularly dog concerns, but I can follow up.
Hi, Claudia. In particular, if you're allowed to move outside of your local area, that's what dog owners have been wanting, to take their dogs to beaches and far-flung parks. That's the essential question. Is that now allowed after Tuesday? And my second question is just an update, please, on the ongoing care for homeless people across the region.
I think, Kate, you've probably got that.
Yes, thank you very much for that question. Sorry, I was just ensuring that we weren't going to have feedback as I responded. So yes, there is a series of work that is happening in regards to this area, and we're working through our welfare hub with our welfare partners across Auckland to ensure that the needs are being met, as well as ensuring that this is included in our recovery planning under Caring for Community. So at this moment, there is some further directives and information coming out in national areas, and we're working our way through that information. So I can provide you further clarity offline.
Thanks, Kate. Appreciate that.
On the question of homeless, Kathy, we're getting material through from Housing First and the housing agencies. I think we're housing up to around 500 people that would normally have been homeless or rough sleepers. And I've raised with Minister Cepoloni that there's obviously, it's going to be quite important when we come to the end of level 3 not to take people out of motels and say, well, you're back out in the street.
Yeah.
So there's a big challenge there, not an easy one to solve, but how we transition back and try to maintain that housing support for people that were previously sleeping rough. Can I just make one other comment, and well, it's really a question to Ian and Kate. I can see some problem with the change of definition from local to regional. Local is now quite clearly defined under level 4. It's in your neighbourhood. I'm not sure what regional means in relation to Auckland. Does it mean that I can go to see my son in Pukekohe, because that's part of I'm in the Franklin ward. I presume that's regional. But would I be allowed to go across to the other side of the shore if I had a relation, a close family member there? If there's a grey area, there'll be trouble, and I think we need to seek out if we can get a more specific definition of what regional means, because if it's left up to our discretion, then we'll extend the boundaries. So maybe if you could work on that, Ian, that would be helpful.
Yes, certainly, and I think if you've just been reading Councillor Hill's comments, the regional is very orientated towards work. So I think the message of staying local is still very much the right message under level 3.
So that's a conservative interpretation, but I'm not sure everybody will take that unless it's made slightly clearer. Councillor Josephine Bartley.
Thank you, and thank you everyone for your work. I'm still getting photos sent to me of people playing on playgrounds, and I'm wondering if there's a link with people playing on playgrounds with the areas that have got development where there are no more backyards, and that's why they're going to the playgrounds. Is there any way we can do more to close off the playgrounds aside from just signs and target those playgrounds that we tape up, for instance? Because I know we've got over 8,000.
Kia ora, Councillor. This is Claudia. I might be able to comment on that. It's what I can do is, if you can possibly send to me the information that where you've got specific concerns, either to me directly or to Rod Sheridan, then we can follow up on those playgrounds that might be at risk and look at what additional measures we need to add.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks, Claudia. Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Thank you for the daily updates. No questions.
Okay, thank you very much for all of the team that's online today. And can you pass our collective thanks on to the 257 Auckland Council staff members who are contributing to the work of the Auckland Emergency Committee. I think that's a big effort. Big thanks to our librarians for ringing nearly 15,000 over 70-year-olds, not with internet connections. And I know that there's another team, Kate, that's shortly focused on contacting Pacifica members of the community to check on their well-being. So there's a big effort going on there, and I want to acknowledge everybody that's involved with it. So that if I just I'll move, and maybe Sharon, you would like to second that we receive the report, and the reports basically they're both from Ian and Kate and their team, and also from Ravin Jadaram, and thank them for that for their work.
Thank you.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
To the contrary,
Aye.
no. Carried. Right.